Today on Brian's Budget Garage, we're going to be removing a transmission out of a 1950 Pontiac. It's the hydra-matic transmission, the very first actual automatic transmission, basically the grandfather of all transmissions. So we're going to be removing it and show you what it takes. It's definitely different than newer transmissions, and it's heavy. It's all cast iron. So just to let you know, part of this will be narrated because some of my last videos that I took were actually taken in slow motion, which does not record sound. So there will be some voiceover on this one, and we'll see how it goes. But hopefully you'll be able to see how this works in case you're actually removing an old hydramatic transmission from an old vehicle. Thank you for watching.
Okay, the first thing we have to do is remove the drive shaft, and that's where it goes into the transmission, and the back is where it hooks onto the axle. You remove the nuts on the back side of those bolts, U-bolts, and slide it out. This is how you save the end caps. Make sure you put tape around them so that you don't lose the end caps on the U-joint. Also, you want to check the yoke for any kind of damage or lines on it. Make sure that it's smooth. The first thing you remove is the cover over the torque converter. It's 6 volts. Then in the torque converter you have 31 bolts that hold the flywheel to the torque or actually toroid. You grab the teeth with a screwdriver, move it down, and just turn it around until you get all 31 bolts out. Right there is the plug for the draining the torque converter. It's not really a torque converter, but essentially it is. You need to drain that. You also need to drain the pan. There's about 2 gallons or 2.5 gallons of fluid in there, and I caught that in a 5-gallon bucket. That was the easiest way for me. So here's more on the bucket and the tools and the mess. I'm definitely not going to be saving that. I will be taking that to recycle. Here I paint, before I actually separate the two, I paint the flywheel and the torque converter cover so that when I put it back together I know the exact placement of where it goes back together. So here I'm checking out basically how to separate that, where it's going to separate. It separates at that torque converter cover, and so you need to make sure that there's several studs you need to make sure they go in the wheel correctly. That's part of why you need to align these two. Here I'm actually removing the shift linkage and the right side of the bar there, so trying to get everything loose from that transmission.
Okay, for this center one, I can't get a thing on there because of the brake handle in the way. So two wrenches. And this one happens to be a nice ratchet wrench. That'll help. Third bolt on this side. Again, before you do this, make sure you have the weight held up with these two jacks. Very heavy, you don't want it to fall down on its own. Okay, now we do the other side. Now I'm going to actually remove the bolts to the engine mount. I will show you them to you on that side. Alright, I'm going to now remove these bolts to the engine mount. Goes over to that mount right here. So I'm going to remove these. They're 5/8 inch. Alright. The bar should be pretty much loose now. Should be able to remove cross member. Alright. Right now, that's the only thing there's no cross member. The only thing holding up that transmission is that jack right there. And the engine, this jack right here. So we definitely want to make sure we have everything supported before we do that. The next step will be to remove these bolts that hold the transmission. The bell housing will come apart in two pieces. And the bolts are actually right there. Right above that. I don't know if you can see that. Then there's two on the other side. And then there's two on top. The two on top you have to get to from inside the car. That's probably going to be next, is going inside the car to remove the two top bolts. With these two bolts here, right there and there. So right here, this bell housing splits. So this part stays to the engine, and so it is a flywheel. This part and this part go with the transmission. So it splits here and here. Definitely different than what it is. And you also don't need to take off the starter here, because the starter is not an issue, because it hooks to this part that stays with the engine. It does not hook to this part which goes with the transmission. That's going to be the next step. The next step we have to do, we've got to actually remove 6 bolts out of the middle part of the bell housing. You don't take the whole bell housing off here. You actually cut the bell housing in half. There's 6 bolts that actually hold on the back part of the bell housing. The front part of the bell housing, they actually connect to the engine. So the front part of the bell housing and the flywheel stay on the engine. Here is the rear, I guess you can call it engine mount or transmission mount, depending on how you want to say it. This rear mount for the engine transmission, you basically take it off by removing these bolts here and here. These 2 bolts, and on the other side are basically 4 of the 6 that actually hold this back bell housing from the front bell housing. So this is the front bell housing, this is the back. It splits off right here. So it's going to split here, and the torque converter, although it's not called that, toroidal or something like that, it splits right here. And I've already taken off the 31 bolts for that. So this part's going to split, and this part's going to split, and the whole transmission should be sliding back after that. Again, at this point you better have your transmission jack and your engine jack. You want them both jacked up and not able to fall down. The last 2 bolts are going to be way up under here. You think, well, how am I going to get to that? Well, inside the cab there's 2 plates which you will remove to get to those final bolts. So actually I'm going to remove the plates inside the cab first, or the bolts inside the cab, then I'll come down here to remove these 4. So if I had thought about this better, I would have actually done this while it was on the ground, removed it before I had to clamp the ladder and actually do this while it's on a lift. I believe you could actually take those 2 bolts out without too much issue because you still have 4 of them holding it in. But now that I didn't, I'm going to actually have to climb up in the cab and do that. So we're inside the cab now, and you can see the 2 top bolts through these 2 little ports here. There and there. There is a cap like that, just a little snap plug that fits in the floor. I'm missing one, so I have glued this on without realizing I was going to have to take that off. But so you open up these holes, and you can see the what looks to be 5/8 bolts in there. So we're going to go ahead and zip those out. Now it's time to take out these bolts. 2 on this side and 2 on that side. I'm actually going to take one totally out and then take the second one partially out, just to make sure there's no weirdness going on with balance. It's come to taking this apart. I have to be real careful because this is real heavy and it's real top heavy. Hoping nothing weird happens. The stability of this is not the best. Now it's come time to actually drop this out. The idea is lower this a little bit, maybe lower the engine. It has to slide back and then out a little bit. So I'm going to lower this a little bit. Transmission. Go very slowly on this, and keep an eye out. If everything goes bad, watch it. Just get out of the way. One thing you have to do is make sure that it's level coming out. You have to make sure the crack in there is coming out evenly or it lines up. So you got to make sure that these are aligned by raising and lowering the engine transmission to make sure they're aligned. Okay, now again I'm just going to be pulling it backwards. Alright, got this thing down, all the way down the car. I wrapped this strap around it on the back because it's somewhat front heavy. Don't want the thing falling over forward. That stabilizes it. Now I can actually move the cart. I'm going to drag it out of here so that it can be worked on. So that's how you actually remove the transmission on a 50 Pontiac, or probably pretty much any old 50s GM. Now it comes time to rebuild it and clean it up and make it work better. So thanks for watching.